Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. As folks are getting settled in, I will go ahead and share some information as you're logging in. This is City of Austin Development Services. I'm Isis Lopez, Engagement Manager for Development Services. We help bring you information about our services and any updates that we have coming on. As you are getting settled in and as folks are logging in to today's session, I will share some of our public meetings page where we have a copy of the recordings of previous meetings. In there, you'll find an archive of previous sessions. We have a few learning series, including a session called Info Series, where we talk about our services and information from our subject matter experts. We also have recordings on the Land Development Academy and different one-on-one classes, including subdivision one-on-one and what you need for legal documents as you for our Land Development Academy. So I went ahead and put it in the chat as folks are logging in. Today we have subject matter experts from Development Services. We have Lindy Garwood, Brent Lloyd, Chris Johnson, Heather Chaffin, and Clarissa Davis. We're here to talk to you about SB840 and some implementation guidance as you are coming in. All right. Again, thanks everybody for joining us. And as we're getting started, let me give an overview of today's session. So we have a presentation with our subject matter experts. So Lindy will walk us through implementation guidance for SB840. And after the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions. And throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A portion of Zoom. So you should have a Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom. If you have trouble accessing that, go ahead and send me a chat, and I'll go ahead and help you troubleshoot. And we will get to those questions at the end of the presentation. We might not have time for all questions, and we might not have answers for every question, but we'll answer as many as we can. And then for those who we can't answer, we will do our best to answer to the best of our ability. And then let's see. All right, well, it looks like we have a few folks in the room. Appreciate everybody taking your time to join us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindy to get us started in today's presentation. Lindy, Brent, go ahead.
So yeah, I'll just Lindy is going to be the star. Am I on? Am I
Yes, you
audible?
are. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to set the stage and offer a few introductory comments, and then we're going to turn it over to Lindy. And we have a dream team of folks here with ECs from our communications group, and we also have Clarissa Davis and Heather Chafin from Site Plan, and Chris Johnson, veteran of all things DSD. So I think we'll have a good team of people once we get to the questioning phase. And I'm Brent Lloyd, the development officer, and we are ADS, Austin Development Services. There will be a grace period where we still respond to DSD, but eventually you'll have to start calling us ADS. I just want to say a few things about the topic. We're here to talk about SB840, which is affectionately referred to as residential in commercial. And this is the most recent effort by our state legislature to adopt rules that will apply statewide that are meant to encourage housing and help to address, I think, what everybody recognizes to be a housing crisis. And what we're going to talk about today is the city's application of SB840 and what our interpretation of the bill is as applied to the city's land development code. Our focus is going to be operational and practical. We're going to try to focus on the questions that we think the design professionals that are with us this afternoon and in the audience have, as well as people, Austin residents who are just generally interested in how the lay of the land may change with respect to development in their neighborhoods and in areas that are traditionally commercial only zones. So we want to provide as much guidance as we're able to. I also want to, let everyone know that we're working to finalize a set of written guidelines that'll be posted on the website soon. So you'll have that to look forward to, and we'll make sure everybody here knows when those are posted. A couple things that we're not going to talk much about today. I think there are other cities around the state who may be subtly interpreting the bill differently. So I think there probably are a variety of approaches throughout the city. And we're not going to focus so much on debates about what the bill means, the nuances of the bill language, or what other cities are doing. We're really going to focus on what Austin is doing and how we're interpreting the bill, which we think is generally in line with other cities across the state, but I think there are subtle differences, as I mentioned, and we're not going to be prepared today to dive into that. We're also not going to be able to talk at much length about future code amendments. So I think everybody recognizes that the land development code will need to be amended to reflect the entitlements that are provided for under SB 840. But what exactly that's going to look like and what the changes are going to be remains a topic of discussion, and our planning department, I think, will be key in leading that effort. And so we're not privy to that much on those issues, to be honest with you. And I think those discussions are just beginning. So what we're going to focus on today is how does SB 840 change how we as permit reviewers and development professionals apply our land development code. There are parts of the code, as Lindy's going to talk about here in a minute, there are parts of the code that are not going to apply in certain situations, and parts of the code that are going to apply differently than they do today in certain situations. And so we want to provide as clear guidance for all of you as we can during this transition period before the city has an opportunity to adopt code amendments. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our principal planner, Lindy Garwood, who has led our effort to develop guidelines for SB 840. Lindy needs no introduction, but she is, in addition to her urban planning background, she also is an architect and brings a lot of experience to this. So look forward to her comments. And with that, I will turn it over to Lindy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brent. Just so everyone knows, right before this, of course, I started having internet troubles and my internet completely crashed and I had to sign into a different network here at the PDC. So hopefully that will be a short-lived problem and we'll be able to continue. But if something does happen, I will return. Hopefully it doesn't. Like Brent said, I'm Lindy Garwood. I'm a principal planner with Development Services. Thanks for joining us for the implementation of SB 840. Today, we will be discussing what SB 840 is, what is included in the new regulations, how the new regulations modify our existing site development standards, what regulations will not be modified by SB 840, and then we'll have, again, questions at the end. One thing to note, go back, Yusuf. One thing to note, this presentation will be focused on the new allowances for the site for mixed use and multifamily and commercial zoning, and we won't be touching as much on the SB 840 regulations that are applicable to conversion of existing structures. Those regulations are primarily focused on process and impact fees and what analyses are permitted and things like that, rather than the site development standards. And we really wanted to primarily focus this presentation on how SB 840 interacts with our code. Next slide. So a little bit of background on what SB 840 is. It's SB stands for the Senate bill. So it's Senate Bill 840 was approved by the Senate on May 26th and then signed into law on June 20th of this year. The bill requires the city to allow a mix of mixed use or multifamily developments within zoning districts that have historically been commercial only. If a zoning district allows office, commercial, retail, warehouse, or mixed use, then multifamily and mixed use developments are now permitted by right in that district. Additionally, as part of that, SB 840 establishes new site development standards for projects that qualify for SB 840, and we're going to go through the specifics of what those new site development standards are as we go through the presentation. The bill went into effect on September 1st of this year, and projects that are submitted after September 1st are eligible to apply for for residential and commercial. And then if your project was in review prior to September 1st, you'll need to submit a new application to take advantage of the SB 840 regulations. Next slide. Qualifying mixed use or multifamily projects will now be administratively approved on traditionally commercial zoning lots. Zone changes, including rezonings into density bonus programs such as VMU, will no longer be required to add residential or mixed use to a commercial site. This is the biggest process change. You will no longer have to have the zoning change in order to do that. However, our density bonuses do remain in our code and available to rezone into for projects who want to add additional entitlements such as additional height. Most projects, if they are not looking for additional height, will now submit directly to site plan rather than first having to go back for that zoning change. Next slide. So SB 840 can be applied to any of our commercial zoning districts. That includes neighborhood office, limited office, general office, neighborhood commercial, community commercial, central business district, downtown mixed use, general services, or excuse me, general commercial services, and commercial highway services. It can also be used in any overlay where an office, commercial, retail, warehouse, or mixed use, where those uses are permitted. So that would be in things like PUDs, PDAs, NCCDs, TODs, anything that's kind of an extra acronym in our zoning string. If it allows those commercial uses, it will also be permitting for SB 840 projects. And this map on the right shows areas that are available for SB 840. So the green is primarily where it's available. The orange is the airport zone, and then the purple is some industrial buffers, and we'll get into all of that coming right now. Next slide. So there are a few limitations, as I just mentioned, on where SB 840 can be applied. Projects are not eligible to participate in SB 840 if located in a zoning district that allows heavy industrial uses. For purposes of this, heavy industrial uses include basic industry, general warehousing and distribution, light manufacturing, recycling centers, resource extraction, and stockyards. So if a use allows any, or excuse me, if a zoning district allows any of those uses, it would be considered heavy industrial. The primary zoning districts that include those uses are industrial park, limited industrial service, and major industrial service. However, if you have one of those zoning districts like industrial park or limited industrial, and it has a CO or a PDA or some other regulating overlay that removes all uses that are related to industrial from that site, then that site would then be eligible for SB 840. So if you had like LIPDA that removed all the heavy industrial uses in the purple box, then you could do SB 840. Otherwise, SB 840 would apply. Or excuse me, SB 840 would not apply. And then if there's a PDA, PUD, R&D, or other standalone ordinances that add heavy industrial uses to a site, then the site is no longer eligible for SB 840. So if you have something like commercial highway, but it also has a PUD that adds heavy industrial uses, then that site would no longer be eligible for SB 840 because heavy industrial uses would be permitted on the site. Next slide. A couple of other exclusions. If you are within 1,000 feet of an existing heavy industrial use or site, then you're not eligible for SB 840. For the city of Austin, the map on the right shows the general location of these sites for where we already have heavy industrial uses. Currently, a map is available to staff to help determine the proximity of projects to these sites. So if you have a project, if you have a project in mind and you want to know if your project is in proximity to one of these 11 locations, set a meeting with staff to review the location's proximity. And hopefully, we're working internally to see if we can get a public-facing map, but at this time, it's only available to staff. So make an appointment with the PDC. Additionally, oh, sorry, no, go back. Thank you. Additionally, if a site is within 3,000 feet of an airport or military base, it may also not be used for SB 840. So this includes public and private airports, as well as military bases such as Camp Mabry. And then the last exclusion is for an area that's been designated as a clear zone or accident protection zone. And then for the couple of uses that have a distance buffer, those are measured radially from the boundary of the triggering property, so the airport or military base or industrial zone, from their setback, or excuse me, from their lot line. It's 1,000 foot or 3,000 foot buffer from their lot lines. All right, next slide. So these are definitions for mixed use and multifamily residential that are outlined in SB 840. And they kind of detail what is a qualifying project for an SB 840. The first is mixed use residential, which is the development or use of a site with residential and non-residential uses in which residential uses are at least 65% of the total square footage of the development. The total square footage of the development is different than how we have been historically applying the separation of uses on a site. Typically in DSD or ASD, we have calculated per building, and now it's per site. So you would be able to have a completely commercial project or completely commercial building and a completely residential building on the same site. And as long as the residential building was 65%, it would still be considered 65% of the overall site FAR. Then that would still be considered a mixed use residential project. The total square footage would be calculated according to the definition for gross floor area in section 25.121. And then if a project is less than 65% residential for the whole site, then it would not qualify as mixed use. And it would need to either increase the amount of residential to above 65% or go ahead and pursue a zone change to allow a mixed use project with less than 65% residential. So that threshold is important for it to be by right. The next definition is multifamily, which is the use or development of a site for 3 or more dwelling units within 1 or more buildings. The term includes the use or development of residential condominiums. So this definition, in addition to allowing condominiums, it also allows multifamily that looks like townhouses. So we call those row houses when they're all on the same site, but it's a multifamily product, but it looks like individual units. That is also covered in this multifamily residential definition. But townhouse use, which are townhouse products that are attached, but all on individual lots, that is not covered in this multifamily residential. It all has to be on the same lot. And so that's a slight distinction. But the general takeaway from these definitions is that if your project is at least 65% residential, it can qualify as an SB 840 project. So 65 to 100% qualifies, under 65% does not qualify. Next slide. So as previously mentioned, projects that do qualify for SB 840 i.e. any project that's 65% residential or greater, are eligible for new site development standards. Florida area ratio, the maximum is removed for those projects, and you have unlimited FAR. And then the maximum density is set at 54 units per acre. Next slide. So they're also entitled to some revised setbacks, which is the lesser of the setback that's established by the base zoning district or overlay, or 25 feet. So whichever of those is less. Overlay setbacks can be anything from subchapter E, or a regulating your small area plan, NCCD, neighborhood plan ordinance, or conditional overlay. So if there's a specific setback in any of those or the base district that is greater than 25 feet, the 25 feet would be applicable. And then also for height, you are permitted the greater of the height permitted for the commercial uses by either the base zone or any overlay, or 45 feet. So again, the height can be in a regulating plan, NCCD, MP ordinance, or the base district, or 45 feet, and you can have the greater of those two. In addition to the development standards described, SB 840 also has specific allowances for not requiring excess parking. However, they don't really apply to Austin since we have removed our on-site parking requirements. And then outside of these modifications to our site development standards, all of our other standards that do not conflict with these continue to apply. Examples would include impervious cover limits, building coverage limits. So anything that isn't expressly in conflict would just continue to apply as normally. Next slide. To implement the new state laws, site development standards, some of Austin's land development code standards have to be modified. First is compatibility. The first height limit, which is currently set at 40 feet, would be increased to 45 feet for qualifying projects. And you can see an image of what that would look like in what the height limit I'm referencing in the diagram. City capital view corridors, the greater would apply, whether the CVC height limit or 45 feet, whichever one was greater, would it be applicable. And then for waterfront overlay, the lesser applies of the setback established by the waterfront overlay or 25 feet. Waterfront overlay setbacks are not considered environmental setbacks. They are zoning setbacks, and so they would be subject to SB 840. And in most cases, the 25 feet will be the lesser amount. Next slide. So the application of subchapter E regulations is a little bit more complicated. Whether regulation continues to apply is based on how the applicability table in subchapter E, section 1.2.1, assigns that regulation to a zoning district or a use, and it depends on what kind of zoning district or use. So we'll be walking through a couple of examples. For qualifying projects, subchapter E regulations would continue to apply if section 1.2.1 applies the regulation to all zoning districts or non-residential zoning districts. So i.e. commercial or industrial, but industrial doesn't apply in this case because you can't use SB 840 on most industrial sites. So all zoning or commercial zoning districts. And I emphasize zoning districts because commercial uses are handled differently. So all zoning districts or commercial zoning districts would continue to apply. An example of this is in the top box, which I know is kind of hard to see. There's a lot of, the table is pretty wide. And, but this is an excerpt of table 1.2.1, and it applies, sorry, it's too small for me even to see. That's not helpful. Okay, sorry. The relationship of streets to sidewalks. And if they are applicable to suburban roadways, then it would apply to all commercial zoning districts. And then if it is a development of 5 acres or more, it's applicable to all zoning districts. So those are 2 examples of that language and how it's, where that distinction is. And then subchapter E regulations also apply to SB 840 projects if the regulation is applied to multifamily residential uses. The bottom example shows that private common open space is applicable to all multifamily uses. So this is an example of how that use is called out as being applicable here. Next slide. In the same manner, for qualifying projects, there are certain regulations that do not apply. If table 1.2.1 applies the regulation to a commercial or non-residential use, then it would only be applicable to a building that is either 100% commercial or the portion of the building that is commercial. So if you have ground floor, it would be applicable to the ground floor commercial, but it wouldn't be applicable to 100% residential project or 100% residential buildings or the residential portion of any building. An example of this is shade and shelter requirements that are only applicable to non-residential land uses. Also, for SB 840 projects that are not utilizing the bonus entitlements in the VMU program, those requirements would not be applicable. So here in the bottom excerpt, you can see that it talks about requirements for mixed use and participation in the VMU project. And so if you're not actually using VMU to get your multifamily or mixed use in a commercial zone, if you're just using SB 840, you would not have to comply with those regulations in subchapter E. However, for projects who do want the additional entitlements that VMU provides, they would be subject to the requirements in subchapter E applicable to VMU. So if you want the VMU bonus, you have to do the VMU standards, even with the passage of SB 840. And then last but not least, there are also regulations that SB 840 did not modify at all. That would include the historic landmarks, regulations protecting historic landmarks and local historic districts, and regulations for environmental features. That includes critical water quality zones, critical environmental features, water quality transition zones, FEMA floodplains, and erosion hazard zones. Those all continue to apply as normal. And with that, that is the end of the presentation. And we're happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Appreciate you and appreciate the information that you were able to give us. I'll remind folks that this presentation is being recorded, and I went ahead and put in the chat a link to where we will be posting a copy of the recording of the presentation along with a copy of the presentation itself. And that is www.austintexas.gov/page/public-meetings. And we do have quite a few folks tuned in today. And so I'll try my best to run through the questions that we are receiving as they're being received. Again, if you have any questions, if you can please use the Q&A feature that helps us keep track of which questions have been answered and which ones are still pending. Lindy, we went through this one pretty quickly, and I hadn't clicked next while we were doing. So some of the folks asked us if you can go back to the historic landmark chat slide So I'll go ahead and leave this one on the screen for a little bit because I ran by that one pretty quickly. And so that way folks can go ahead and take a look at it. The other thing I'll say is that, yeah, in addition to that, I went ahead and opened up the chat. The chat kind of helps me figure out some of the troubleshooting in terms of technology, but the Q&A really does help me keep track of which ones have been answered and which ones have not been answered. One of the questions that we had from one of our participants is, and I think you addressed it already, Lindy, was whether we can download the map that was shown in the industrial buffer zone. We set that for now, that's internal, correct? And that that can be through an appointment, is that correct, Lindy? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, unfortunately, it's not available to download at this time. We are working internally to see if we can get one that's available for the public. It's sensitive since some of these sites are somewhat protected sites, and so we have to be careful about how we share them. But we are working on something along those lines. Until then, you can make an appointment with our development services staff, and they will be able to help you determine if you're within the buffer.
Okay. All right, one of our attendees is wanting to confirm if there's a structured parking garage that the square footage doesn't count toward the gross square footage for the 65% rule.
That is correct. 25.121 defines gross floor area as, you know, any site that any part of an enclosed building that is over 6 feet, but it does have exceptions, and parking is one of them. And so we don't count parking in for most multifamily. There is some that does count parking, but for most multifamily, it does not include the parking. And so it would not be counted towards the 65% rule.
Gotcha. And does that include, the next question is, if the parking, what if the parking is shared between residential and non-residential?
So again, this is done by site. The 65% is calculated per site, as opposed to previously when we apply subchapter E prior to SB840, it was the usage percentage was calculated per building. Now it's per site. So if you have a completely residential building and a completely commercial building all on one site and they share parking in between, as long as the commercial building is only 35% and the residential is 65%, it qualifies for SB840, and the parking is not counted towards the gross floor area for either use.
Gotcha. And again, folks, the Q&A feature you can take a look at which ones have already been answered as we go through, and we are getting quite a few, and so I'm running through them as best of our ability. So I appreciate y'all's patience as we read through them. The next question, one of our attendees is asking, can you develop across multiple parcels with a unified development agreement as long as the lots have all the correct zoning?
I will defer to one of my colleagues who have more experience with unified development agreements.
Hey, I'll go ahead and answer this one. I'm Clarissa Davis. I'm a planning officer with the site plan team for land use review. Yes, so if you're actually able to meet the criteria to be able to apply for a UDA, or more so go after that, it would apply for all of the sites, because at that time, all sites will be unified as long as the zoning allows for that multifamily, then you're all set. But yes, you would be able to get a UDA and have those lots combined and be able to take advantage of this.
Got it. Thank you so much, Clarissa, for that answer. The next question that we have is, how does this affect life safety requirements of fire review? We don't have anybody from Austin Fire, but I'm not sure if maybe Lindy, Clarissa, or Heather, if y'all might have an answer. If not, we might have to get back to our participant.
We can definitely circle back, but my understanding is that SB840 specifically does not override the technical codes. So all of our technical codes would continue to apply as normal.
Yeah. Richard is actually
fire.
part of fire review. So
Yes. Yeah. So I was like, I didn't specify.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what that industrial area map is about. A lot of those are the areas that have significant hazardous materials or other features that we're being careful about, or AFD is being careful about.
Gotcha. The next question that we have is, can we clarify one more time the difference between townhomes and row homes for SB 840? Lindy?
Yes. So this is just our the way they apply in our code in general. It does apply to SB 840, but it's also just applicable to any multifamily project. A townhouse is a defined use in our land development code, and it has to be a single unit on a single lot. And so those projects would not be eligible for SB 840 because it would not be considered multifamily because it's a single unit on a single lot. Row houses are just a form that multifamily can take, in that it can look like townhouses, but they actually are all attached product that are all on one single lot, and so it's considered multifamily. And so that row houses are allowed on SB 840 because they are technically a multifamily product as opposed to townhouse, which is not.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Lindy. And thanks, folks, for continuing to ask those questions. The next question that we have is whether we have a test case to show on how this would be applied to potential development, whether real or hypothetical. And I believe the answer is no, right, Lindy? We don't have one, or do we?
Not at this time.
Okay, gotcha. All right, the next question that we have is, if you have a tract zoned GO within 1,000 feet of an LI zoned tract that does not heavy industrial use on the adjacent LI zone tract, using SB 840 prohibited on the GO tract simply because, I think this was a comment talking about using LI zoning authorities heavy industrial. Do you have more information on like heavy industrial and how it interacts with SB 840, Lindy?
Yeah, so if you have heavy industrial uses allowed on your site, you are not eligible for SB 840. So whether that's the whole site or a portion of the site, Brent and Chris or Heather or Clarissa, I don't know if y'all want to take that portion, whether they could still apply it to the GO portion. They can still use SB 840 or not, but my understanding is that probably not, because you still have heavy industrial allowed on the LI portion.
That'll be correct. If heavy industrial is part of that site, then no, we wouldn't be able to apply it per the language of it. But if it's, another site that doesn't necessarily have heavy industrial, but some of the uses that are outside of that language, then yes, in this case, no.
Also, if you have, if the full zoning string had like a PDA or a PUD or a CO that removed the heavy industrial uses from being allowed, that also would make it eligible for SB 840.
Correct.
All right, thank you so much. We had a few folks ask whether this presentation was going to be available publicly, and I went ahead and put in the chat the webpage where we will be posting a copy of the presentation along with a copy of the recording, and that's austintexas.gov/page/public meetings, and that will be available by next week. All right, we have a question. For mixed use building, how is common area divided between residential and commercial?
I'll again defer to my colleagues in site plan who deal with this on a more regular basis.
Heather, if you want to answer this one, you can. If not, I can answer. Figure we divide and conquer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was briefly distracted, so I missed the question.
I can go ahead and
I can
answer
repeat it.
Totally up to you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and repeat it. For a mixed use building, how is the common area divided between residential and commercial?
Well, it depends on what that common area serves. For example, a lot of places have a lobby that is, part of a leasing office for the residential. Some of it is for the commercial. I think it really comes down to very specific case by case, because we have such a wide variety of mixed use. From, retail on the ground floor with residential above, but it would, case by case basis, it depends on exactly what kind of mixed use.
Just to clarify, is the question talking to like open space and how that's divvied up? Or are we just talking about like common space between commercial and residential? I want to make sure we
Right,
get
a
to that.
lobby or a,
Yeah, we had for mixed use building, how is the common area divided? But yeah, if folks want to provide more news, like more details, if they can go ahead and put it in the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and address that.
right. If it is open space, that is something that is required in conjunction with the multifamily, then we would probably be looking at it as multifamily space. If it's something that was triggered by the multifamily use, but if it's something that's just an entryway, a lobby, an atrium, or that is not specifically for subchapter E open space, it's harder to answer.
Gotcha. All right, the next question that we have here, Lindy, not sure if we would know this or it might be deferred to someone from planning, is how will neighborhood plans work with SB 840? Would you know, or would this be something that we might have to get back to folks on?
I will say
I feel comfortable with that one
Okay,
from my
great, go for it.
previous position. I'm sorry, I did
No,
work in
please.
zoning and neighborhood planning for a little while. Neighborhood plans generally don't directly change the zoning regulations, except for some neighborhood plans. At the time the neighborhood plan was adopted, certain conditional overlays were added to a zoning string. So I don't think neighborhood plan areas are going to really be a big factor. It's the zoning string that was created in conjunction with the creation of the neighborhood plan. That'll be the driving factor.
Thanks, Heather. All right, the next question that we have is, how does affordability unlocked work with SB 840? Are we able to base our height increase on the base zoning or on the 45 foot?
I don't believe we've discussed specifics on affordability unlocked and how that interacts. That's a good question. I think we'll have to get back with Mr. Gannon.
Okay, gotcha. All right. The next question that we have is if affordable housing requirements are based on height and FAR is not unlimited, does that affect the affordable housing requirements? For example, if you were under a height but over FAR?
So yes, if you do not need the additional height permitted by our density bonuses, you would not be required to participate in the density bonus, and that is where the affordable housing is provided. So it's really only if you need the additional height or other entitlements that the various density bonuses provide that you would still need to provide the affordable housing. Otherwise, it's by right.
Gotcha. The next question that we have is, are single family detached condos considered multifamily and can utilize SB 840? If so, 2+ townhomes don't share a wall, but all do share the same lot.
No, single family detached is not considered multifamily.
Okay. And I think we had a more information on the common area, Heather and Clarissa. So our attendee wrote common area within the building, amenity space that is shared between hotel and condos, lobby space that is shared between uses. So I don't know if y'all had more information based on that information.
I can kind of speak to that, and it kind of lends itself back to the answer that Heather gave earlier. It really is a case-by-case basis. I mean, if we're going to talk about like hotels sharing the same lot as multifamily, we would really have to look at how multifamily actually interacts with that hotel use, just to kind of talk about some of the specifics that you put in the answer or the question rather. It's really going to determine how they interact with each other. If we're looking at a site where we have commercial on one side, multifamily on the other, and a parking garage in the middle, are the multifamily residents actually interacting with that hotel use? You know what I mean? So if we're looking at a site where, on one road, multifamily is, or any resident is accessing the site on the left, but hotels on the right, is there actually any interaction? So we really have to look at the specifics of that site and see how they would interact with one another. And that's when we'll start talking to the developer about how we can accommodate some of the open space requirements that we have and some of just, the common area, and kind of go case by case basis on that. It's really hard to give a black and white answer to that.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that information, Clarissa, and for folks who are asking their questions. The next question that we have is, how does the downtown density bonus program and related affordable housing requirements, can we increase density without increasing affordable housing? I know we did talk a little bit about affordable housing in a little bit, but is there anything else that we wanted to add for this, Lindy?
I don't believe so. Yeah, it just, unfortunately, you will be able to have unlimited FAR, and if you don't need the additional entitlements of the bonus, you won't be required to provide that affordable housing. But we do hope that people continue to use the bonuses for that additional entitlements, and provide the affordable housing if they're able to. The bonuses are not going away. They are still available.
Gotcha. The next question that we have is, can changes to approved projects be adjusted within a site plan correction?
No. Any project that was in review prior to September 1st or approved prior to September 1st are not eligible to use SB 840 regulations unless they resubmit a new application and new application fees for that project. The reason for that is it is significant. It is a significant enough change that our reviewers would have to start over from scratch in reviewing. And so since it will take the same amount of time and labor on our part, it needs to be a new application.
Gotcha. And the next question that we have is, would a condo residential use qualify for SB 840? What if the condo residential use is detached?
Yes, condo residential use qualifies for SB 840. In the definition of multifamily, condo is specifically called out as allowed or as considered multifamily. It can be attached or detached as long as they are all on the same site. Again, that goes back to how the difference between townhouse and row house being on different lots versus all the same lot. As long as the condo is all on the same lot, it qualifies as multifamily.
Gotcha. We have questions, and we have time for about 2 more questions, and so I'll try to get to those as quickly as possible as we're wrapping up this session. And then we had some clarification on the neighborhood plan. So Heather, you might have some information on this. The question was whether it also changes what can be enforced by restricted covenants. And I don't know if you had information on that, or if it's something that you're not able to
the city is only party to public restrictive covenants that are approved by city council. There are some neighborhood planning associations and areas that have a contact team that request private restrictive covenants, but the city is not a party to those and does not enforce them.
Right. Okay.
So generally, if it's a public restrictive covenant, it's treated similar to if it was in the zoning string. It's legally binding.
Gotcha. And then the next question is, does a site plan revision count as a new application, or does it have to be a brand new site application?
I will let Chris or Brent answer this one. Chris, you're muted.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I can answer this. No, it would be you would need to do a new site plan application. Or revision would not be a new site plan.
All right. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brent for any last thoughts.
I just want to thank everybody for attending. We've had a great turnout, and I want to thank Lindy and everybody on the staff side that's been available to answer questions. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, our plan is to post a set of written guidelines that will be available to people, and in addition to making Lindy's presentation available, the written guidelines will go a little deeper into the weeds, but very consistent with what Lindy presented. We have a few issues that were touched on during the Q&A that we will follow up individually with folks on. And additionally, we're always available should you have questions. And we look forward to making our application of SB 840 a success. And again, thanks everybody for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.